Someone help me. With a raspy voice, she uttered these words and then completely lost consciousness. It happened suddenly, but as a former doctor, I couldn't pretend not to see it. I shouted frantically, "Is there an AED here? The sooner you start CPR, the better. Doing it is better than not doing it. It can prevent the situation from getting worse. Please, I'll give instructions, so help me out." Then I called out to the landlady's daughter, who was in a panic. "You can do it, you can." At that moment, her eyes widened in shock. "My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a 45-year-old doctor, single. My parents have already passed away, and the only family I have is my brother, who is 18 years older than me. He's 63 now and suffering from early onset dementia, living a peaceful life in a care facility. Usually, he completely forgets about me, but when he's in a good mood, he happily recalls the past and says, 'Let's listen to the usual radio.' When my brother remembers me, it's like the me from our exam days is standing right in front of him. Watching him, I always hope he lives a long life, and it was his existence that inspired me to become a doctor. My brother was also a doctor in his younger days, specializing in pediatrics simply because he loved kids, and he contributed to community healthcare until he was diagnosed with early onset dementia. When I was in middle school and he was in his 30s, we faced a turning point in our lives. It was the year before my high school entrance exams, and we were out in the city buying reference books. Suddenly, a person collapsed right in front of us, causing a commotion. It was a young woman, probably in her early 20s, unconscious and falling face first to the ground. I was so shocked, I could only stand there in a daze. I knew I should help, but it was like my feet were rooted to the spot. Then my brother rushed over to the woman like the wind and administered first aid. He glanced around lightly and shouted in a loud voice, "I'm a doctor. I need more help." With those words, people started gathering, bringing an AED and arranging for an ambulance as per his instructions. Thankfully, the woman regained consciousness thanks to my brother's swift CPR and was soon handed over to the paramedics and taken to the hospital. I can never forget that scene from that day. Not just my brother's quick and efficient actions, but also his ability to lead people. Once they knew he was a doctor, people around felt reassured and waited for his instructions. Even the paramedics seemed a bit relieved knowing that a doctor had already administered first aid. At that moment, I thought to myself, I was a powerless person who couldn't do anything. If it weren't for my brother, that woman might not have been saved. Even if she was saved, she might have had some kind of after effects. In the end, I was nothing more than a nobody who couldn't do anything without my brother. Because I had watched my brother, who was a doctor, since I was a child, I was overwhelmed by my own helplessness. Seeing me like that, my brother put his big hand on my head and said, "You can do it." I didn't know what he was referring to, but for the first time, I felt a deep desire to become a doctor and save many lives. After that, I studied hard, got into my first choice prep school, and continued to work diligently until I passed the medical school entrance exam. When I took the exams, the study was really tough, and there were many times I felt like giving up. At such times, I would listen to my brother's favorite radio show with him to relax. My brother would enthusiastically say with a smile, "This program is pretty good, isn't it? It's hosted by a former doctor who talks about real experiences in the field." As a fellow doctor, I listen to these stories and try to apply them to my own life. Now, it only airs regularly. Still, it has a loyal fan base, so it hasn't been canceled. Every now and then, I listen to that radio show and remember the tough times I went through with my brother during exam season. One day, I was selected to be part of a surgical team for a very difficult operation. The patient was a well-known congressman, and everyone involved said the surgery had to be a success. The team was made up of experienced doctors, with the chief of surgery, known as the Hand of God, leading the operation. There were also many experienced doctors and nurses, making it easy to imagine how much this surgery would impact the hospital and the public. Among them, I noticed two young nurses. They were part of the surgical team, but didn't have much to do. They were exceptional newbies given the opportunity to observe this rare surgery while handling miscellaneous tasks. I heard a greeting, "Nice to meet you," and turned around. The young nurses seemed very eager to absorb everything they could from this surgery. I've always been terrible at remembering people's names and faces, so I quickly forgot their names and felt very apologetic. I think I greeted them back and said something like, "Let's do our best." With surgeries, outpatient visits, and other schedules every day, I was honestly at my limit in terms of memory capacity. On the day of the surgery, with thorough preparation, things took an unexpected turn. Even the chief of surgery, the hand of God, was bewildered, and the operating room was filled with tension. The gauze turned bright red and kept piling up, indicating the severity of the situation. I also worked desperately as one of the doctors to save the patient. Of course, my mind was racing, so I didn't even think about how much time had passed. And after a major surgery that lasted more than 10 hours, the patient passed away. Although everything was perfect until midway, the news reported that the patient's condition suddenly worsened and complications arose. The hospital had to respond continuously, and the doctors, including myself, who participated in the surgery, were ordered to stay at home for the time being. This was a measure to protect us, but it ended up pouring fuel on the fire. Surely, this must be a medical error. That's what people are saying. A famous politician died, and the doctors who attended the surgery are hiding at home and not appearing before the press, which is evidence, they say. In reality, we had held a press conference and explained everything, so there was nothing more we could say. The hospital director considered that it would only cause more confusion if we spoke further, but public opinion didn't accept that. As a result, we were sued by the family. In lawsuits against hospitals, the family's chance of winning is low, and usually the hospital wins, but it's not guaranteed. The issue was whether this was an unfortunate event caused by the patient's sudden change in condition, not a mistake by the medical staff. After 3 long years, the trial concluded, and it was decided that the hospital was not at fault. The family, who were initially furious, seemed to have changed their minds through the trial. However, given that my name had spread in a negative way, I decided to end my career as a doctor here. Both the hospital and the patients who chose me strongly urged me to stay, but I had no intention of changing my decision. On my last day at work, after saying goodbye to the people who had helped me, I took a step forward to leave the hospital when I was called from behind. When I turned around, there were 2 young nurses holding a thick file. They apologized for not making it in time and showed me the contents of the file. Seeing it made me feel warm inside at the very end, and I was happy to leave the hospital with such feelings. I deeply appreciated my head to the nurses. "Thank you for all the efforts you've made for me and the surgeons. I'm grateful. You too will become excellent nurses. I truly believe that." Saying only that, I turned my back on their sorrowful faces and left the hospital. How much time has passed since then? I was absent-mindedly watching a midday TV show, preparing breakfast with a celebrity's gourmet report as the background music. When I was working at the hospital, my life had no distinction between morning and night, so after quitting, I ended up leading a rather decadent lifestyle, eating breakfast at noon. Even though I was a doctor, I had accumulated considerable wealth. I preferred a simple life, so my apartment was a 30-year-old wooden building. The rent was about half the market rate for this area. I didn't own a car and always commuted on foot or by bus on rainy days. I had no worries since I didn't have a spouse or children to support. At 18, I got accepted into the medical school at the local public university, and from there, I dedicated myself entirely to my studies and internships, leading a life almost completely devoid of romance. Although I did date a woman during my college years, she was also a medical student, and our busy schedules led to us naturally drifting apart. Since then, I haven't been involved with any women, and now, without a wife, I live alone. Even if I don't work much, I have enough financial security to live comfortably. However, I realized I couldn't continue like this, so I decided to look for jobs. Instead of searching aimlessly, I chose with a clear intention. That job was being a writer. I've always been interested in it and wanted to try it someday. My only real hobby is solo travel. As a travel enthusiast, I often referred to articles by hot spring writers and visited various old inns. No matter how busy I was, I made time for day trips and used my experiences visiting inns across the country to start a blog. Even without any initial income, I thought it could still be considered a proper job since some people manage to make a living from it. My goal wasn't to make money, I simply wanted to share my experiences to help others plan their future travels. 6 months have passed since I started my blog. It received more attention than I expected, and I began to look forward to the readers' reactions. I plan to continue traveling and writing while resting my tired body and mind. I immediately canceled my apartment lease, took only the essentials, and embarked on a new chapter of my life. I boldly bought a DSLR camera and, with tips from a photographer friend, began publishing articles with the theme of stunning scenery and inns. The number of views steadily increased, and I once had a record of tens of thousands in a single day. Occasionally, I received requests from an editor friend who worked for a publisher, asking me to write columns or supervise medical articles. I sometimes accepted these requests, earning a small amount of money to fund my travels. Even though I used to earn a substantial amount as a doctor, the few thousand to tens of thousands of dollars I made doing what I loved felt much more meaningful. I never thought becoming a doctor was a mistake, neither in the past nor now. It gave me life goals and helped me discover a new side of myself, all thanks to being a doctor. In fact, I'm grateful for my past circumstances. The trial was really tough, but we revealed the whole truth out of respect for the deceased patient, hoping their family could find some closure. I am confident that this experience made me who I am today. Gradually, I began to look forward and found life interesting because of its uncertainty. 2 years have passed since then. Now that my writing career is on track, I receive various offers from different fields. Of course, I remain anonymous, with no public appearances or disclosed names. So currently, instead of wandering around the country, I've settled in New York, so the number of carefree trips I take has decreased. However, on this particular day, I got a week off for the first time in a while, so I decided to visit a spa in a certain snowy mountain. Every step I took in the snow, a muffled sound came from the ground. On the way, I saw branches of trees bent under the weight of the accumulated snow and signs saying the road was closed due to the snow. Since I came on foot, it wasn't a problem, but I thought it must be tough for those driving. When I finally arrived at the building, I was taken aback. This inn had once closed down, but someone bought it, renovated it, and now it's recently become popular as a designer inn. The baths here are a bit different. They are said to be slimy when you get in. Interestingly, the door was a sliding door, not an automatic one, which is rare these days. I placed my hand on the door and went inside. I approached the woman at the reception. "My name is Michael. I have a reservation." It turned out that the woman at the reception was the landlady. She, Emma, greeted me with a blossoming smile. "Michael, we've been expecting you. Please, relax and enjoy your stay." The attentive service made me sure that the online reviews were true. The highlight of this inn isn't the spa or the designer building, but the landlady Emma. I placed my luggage in the room I was guided to, opened my laptop to do a bit of work, and then decided to head to the outdoor bath I was curious about. There were already a few other guests, so I asked them about it, and they passionately described it as like soaking in lotion. They said that whether someone is highly beauty conscious or not, anyone can feel the effects of this water. I'm someone who doesn't particularly care about such things. Maybe it's because from a young age, I've worked regardless of whether the sun was up or not. But anyway, it's worth a try. The moment I cleaned myself and soaked in the water, I instantly understood what the other guests were talking about. From my toes to my shoulders, my skin felt like it was coated in a slimy film, and I was surprised. There was no discomfort. It felt like my skin was rejuvenating. After soaking for a while, when I finally got out, I felt oddly refreshed and clean, which surprised me again. It's no wonder this is called a secret spa. And the view is amazing. I had only seen this scenery in pictures, but the real thing is extraordinary. The mountain ridges shimmered in the distance, covered in white, and the surrounding trees were also blanketed in snow. The weather was perfect that day, and the mountains turned red at sunset, making the scenery even more beautiful and mystical. Feeling all my daily fatigue melt away, I spent a relaxing time there. After a long soak in the hot spring, it was finally time for the much-anticipated meal. As I waited to eat in my room, Emma and a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s arrived. It seems that she is the Emma's daughter, Kate, and is serving as the assistant landlady. She mentioned she is still in training and has much to learn. As Kate gazed at me intently, I tilted my head slightly, prompting Emma to start speaking. She just returned here recently, so today is her first time greeting guests. I thought she was staring at me because she was nervous. We will now prepare your meal. Emma's words brought me back to reality. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. As I replied, Emma and Kate smiled and left the room. After finishing dinner and soaking in the spa again, I felt completely refreshed and began working once more. You might think there's no need to work in a place like this, but experiences fade from memory quicker than expected. More precisely, the feelings you have at this moment can only be felt right then and there, and by the time you get home, they become vague. Moreover, writing articles is a source of comfort for me. Anyway, I wanted to convey this excitement to my readers as vividly as possible. With that in mind, I was typing away when I heard a knock on the door. Standing there was Kate, who had greeted me earlier with Emma. Thank you for coming all this way. After a polite greeting, the Kate got to the point. As a token of appreciation to the guests who visited today, they had prepared special drinks and snacks in the banquet hall. Come to think of it, Kate had said it was her first time greeting guests today, so maybe this was a celebration of some sort. I'm sorry to interrupt. If you'd like, please join us. I decided to go after finishing the draft I was working on. After responding to Kate, I headed to the designated banquet hall about 15 minutes later. Many people had already gathered and seemed to be enjoying the post-dinner dessert buffet. The little kids piled their plates high with desserts and devoured them. Seeing this, Emma smiled. Even though I don't like sweets, there were some pastries and traditional sweets that even people like me could eat. Among them, I picked up some vegetable chips that caught my eye. Apparently, these were sourced directly from local farmers. We buy misshapen or overly ripe produce that can't be sold at the market at a low price. Our chefs then use them in stews and mixed juices, and the vegetable and fruit chips you're enjoying tonight were made from them. The natural sweetness of the unsweetened vegetables and fruits spread in my mouth. Seeing the keychain attached to my phone, Kate, who was beside me, showed interest. Isn't that the mascot character from the radio show hosted by a former doctor? As she said, the somewhat strange-looking keychain was something I had received when I won a lottery I had entered previously. I was a bit pleased to think that such a young woman also listened to that program. Medical terminology often comes up, so someone who knows nothing about it might find it boring. However, Kate spoke as if she understood everything. Did you listen to the last broadcast? It was about a woman who worked as a nurse for many years and then obtained a paramedic qualification to work with Doctors Without Borders. Since I follow every episode, I had heard that one too. Nurses can't perform medical procedures without instructions, so delays in instructions can endanger patients' lives. Therefore, I thought that having a medical license would enable more people to be saved in such dangerous areas. The woman, still in her late 30s, was remarkably active, and I was deeply impressed as I listened. She was originally the head nurse at a local hospital. The average age for a head nurse is mid to late 40s, so being appointed at just 39 is truly remarkable. Kate's eyes sparkled, and I thought I recognized something in them. We were having a pleasant and peaceful time, but then tragedy struck suddenly. At the same time as a loud noise, Emma collapsed. "Someone help." With a raspy voice, she said that and then completely lost consciousness. As this sudden event unfolded, everyone stood there with their mouths open, stunned. Memories from my past flashed through my mind like a revolving lantern. I had witnessed someone collapse just like this before and couldn't do anything. I remembered my brother, Ken, rushing past me like a gale to help. If Ken were still here, he would surely be the first to help Emma, just like that time. Helping a woman comes with various issues, and especially men often hesitate to touch due to fear of lawsuits. I've heard such stories a lot recently, but realizing Emma's condition was critical, I shouted desperately, "Is there an aid here? The sooner you start CPR, the better. It's better to do it than to let her fall into a critical state. Please, I'll give instructions, so help me." In such situations, blindly shouting into the crowd doesn't work. I knew it's most effective to directly address someone who looks capable. so I called out to a young man who looked like he could move. He immediately understood and went to get the AED installed near the entrance. Prompted by my voice, a few others began to move quickly and waited calmly for my instructions. We're in a remote area, and cell phone reception is poor. Anyone with a carrier that has good signal, please contact emergency services right away. Also, bring something like a blanket to cover Emma for using the AED. While those helping moved frantically at my voice, Kate turned pale at the sight of her collapsed mother and was too shocked to move. There was no time to comfort her now. I quickly asked, "Does Emma have a pacemaker or anything like that? It's okay for her to wear clothes while using the AED, but just to be safe, I need you to check that there's no metal near where I'm going to place the pads. Also, I'll give you instructions, so if possible, I'd like you, her daughter, to help me with applying the pads." At first, Kate was in such a panic that she couldn't even speak, but she gradually began to regain her composure. "It's okay. My mom has a metal allergy, so she doesn't wear anything like that." Seeing that there was no particular problem, I asked Kate to help, and we placed the pads below her right collarbone and on her left side. We followed the mechanical voice from the AED while waiting for the ambulance, but this was a remote mountain lodge in snowy Colorado. I remembered the road closed signs I saw earlier and felt a wave of despair. Currently, the road is still undergoing repair work, so vehicles have to take a slight detour to get here. That's why it takes more than twice as long as planned, according to the man in contact with the emergency services. In this urgent situation, the other guests are panicking and in a state of confusion. The only one who can calm these guests is Kate, the young landlady. Thinking this, I told her, "Leave this to me, and please guide the guests. Right now, you're the only one who can act as the temporary innkeeper. We don't know what the panicking people might do, so please calm things down here." But Kate shook her head. She said she couldn't do it, also panicking because her mother, Emma, had collapsed. But I grabbed Kate's shoulders with both hands and looked straight into her eyes. "You can do it. I know you can." I said the same words my brother Ken had told me back then. Kate looked startled for a moment, but gradually regained her composure, her face returning to its normal color. "I'll try." As soon as she said that, she immediately started instructing the guests to stay calm. Turning my back to Kate, I faced Emma, who was still unconscious. "Ken, we might just have to do it." I had made up my mind. If we were in a hospital, we could perform surgery right away. But here, we have no surgical tools or operating room. The only thing I can do now is to continue CPR on Emma. Ideally, we should take turns, but the people present are all physically weak, like elderly people, young female guests, and children. There are some young men around with enough strength, but maybe they're scared to do chest compressions outside of a CPR class because no one offered to help. Even though I'm used to it, I'm still human and not exactly young anymore, so fatigue gradually accumulates and sweat drips from my forehead. Then, someone appeared to wipe my sweat. "I'll do it too. I want to save my mother no matter what." It was Kate. She looks like she's in her late 20s, so she probably doesn't have much strength and surely no experience with real CPR on a person. I sensed the strong will in his eyes to absolutely save his mother, so I responded, "All right then, can you switch on the count of 3? Kate, sweating a bit, agreed firmly. "Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. At first, Emma's movements were awkward, but she was definitely performing chest compressions by imitating what I had been doing. Gradually, her actions became more precise, and honestly, her movements didn't seem like those of an amateur. I was curious about who she really was, but there was no time to think about that now. Considering that she had willingly listened to that radio show, I concluded that she probably had a different mindset from the average person. Watching us, the people around who had been on guard seemed to decide to do what they could. I heard voices saying they would bring water or go out to the road to guide the ambulance so it wouldn't get lost. After continuing chest compressions for a while, everyone reacted to the faint sound of an ambulance siren in the distance. Everyone started moving before anyone could give instructions, and I explained the situation as soon as the paramedics arrived. Thanks to continuous chest compressions, they said there was still hope for Emma, and Kate decided to ride along to the hospital. Shortly after the ambulance left the lodge, an elderly woman in a formal clothes walked in. Cindy, Emma's mother, was apparently the previous head of the inn. Although she had already retired, she came to stay and look after the lodge while her daughter and granddaughter were away due to the emergency. As the sound of the sirens faded, the surroundings regained their calm. The lodge's background music seemed unusually loud, and a gray-haired man approached me. "I'm amazed you moved so quickly. We were all frozen in shock and couldn't do anything, but thanks to you, it looks like Emma might be saved." That comment was the start of a series of praises directed at me. Feeling undeserving of such words, I was humbled when Cindy appreciated deeply to me. "Thank you so much for your help with my daughter. I don't know how to express my gratitude. Truly, truly." Emma took over this inn from Cindy just 5 years ago. She mentioned this while checking us in and showing us to our room, explaining that she was always raised with strict discipline. "I think my mother treated me more like a successor than a daughter because she gave me the role of the landlady. I have to work hard to meet her expectations." I remembered Emma's smiling face and said to Cindy, "I think your daughter has become a great landlady. You might think it's presumptuous of me, who stayed here for the first time yesterday, to say this, but her smile really healed me. Your granddaughter also seems to respect her mother very much. This place is truly wonderful." Hearing this, Cindy's eyes welled up and a transparent tear ran down her cheek. Thank you so much. There was a time when I was worried about how things would turn out, but a few hours later, Kate returned and updated me on her mother's condition. Right after my mom collapsed, we started CPR and used the aita continuously, which prevented any brain damage. Really, I can't thank you enough." Hearing this, I felt relieved. I asked the anxious Kate about the procedure they used at that time. "May I ask you something unrelated? But have you by any chance had experience in the medical field?" When I said that, Kate had a look on her face that seemed to ask how I knew. I voiced what I felt. "Your handling and determination made me feel like you weren't an amateur. Actually, I used to be a doctor myself." When I said that, Kate widened her eyes and murmured softly, "I was certain. Could you tell me your name again? It doesn't seem like a coincidence." "Sure. My name is Michael Johnson." When I introduced myself for the first time, Kate covered her mouth with her hand, her eyebrows forming a worried expression as she sank to the ground. "Are you all right?" I asked, and Kate, with tears in her eyes, said, "As I thought, you are Dr. Johnson. I'm the one. The rookie nurse you protected during that failed surgery." I opened my eyes in surprise. The woman in front of me was one of the rookie nurses who had introduced themselves back then. Kate spoke with a pained expression, continuing her words. "I ran away. It's a disgrace. Even though I used to be a healthcare worker, I have no right to call myself that. I pushed all the responsibility onto the doctors." When she mentioned that she was being protected, she was likely referring to the fact that 2 names were excluded from the surgery team. People like me, the surgeon, and other nurses who directly touched the patient couldn't have our names removed. However, there was no need to put such responsibility on those who were just observing to learn. This was a decision made with the agreement of the bosses and the entire team, and it was properly explained to the bereaved family in the end. So, there's no need for her to worry. But looking into Kate's eyes, I suddenly recalled that time. At that time, when the 2 of you showed me the results of the signature campaign, I felt so happy. Even so, do you still belittle yourself as a coward? Kate didn't answer, but I took her silence as affirmation. It was just a result of a series of unfortunate events. As you know, we've already reached a settlement with the patient's family and the hospital. It wasn't a medical mistake, but an unpredictable situation. Even so, thank you for protecting me till the end." When I appreciated her, Kate suddenly started crying uncontrollably. 2 days later, with everyone seeing me off, I left the inn and returned to my home in New York. I decided to write an article about the whole incident. The response was overwhelming, and it even got picked up by online news. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from a radio show director asking if I would appear as a guest. After hearing what it was about and struggling with various emotions, I decided to take the offer. On the show, I revealed that I was Dr. Johnson, a member of the medical team involved in the lawsuit that was widely talked about 2 years ago, and I talked about what happened in the snowy mountains. That incident has already been settled with both parties' agreement. However, I was tormented by the regret of not being able to save the patient as a doctor, so I withdrew from the medical field and lived a quiet life. Then, one day, right in front of me, Emma, the landlady, collapsed. Honestly, I struggled with whether I should take action. But in that moment, it was my much older brother, Ken, who gave me the push I needed. My brother has always been my hero and my role model. As I was talking about him, it was time to read some listener emails. I received a piece of paper from the director, who had a somewhat meaningful smile on his face, and began to read it. Radio name nurse from the snowy mountains. With the help of you, I was able to step forward and help my mother. Dr. Johnson, thank you very much for your support. That's all it said, but it was immediately clear who sent this email. I was surprised that it came from Kate herself. However, I thought the director who found this from the reaction emails was amazing, and I replied, "The one who saved your mother was definitely you, as her daughter. You gathered your courage and took action, right? Even a small step can be a big step for someone. I'm sure your mother is grateful for your bravery." The broadcast received so much feedback that it was re-aired several times, and there's even talk of bringing the show back as a regular program. One day, I visited the facility where my brother Ken is staying. It's amazing that you got on that show. You're the best brother ever. What reflected in Ken's eyes was not me from my college entrance exam days, but me as I am now. A tear ran down my cheek.